The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. But Daniel wasn't thinking about how beautiful it looked. He was thinking about food, real food, the kind that makes your mouth water just thinking about it. The kind he hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. His stomach had stopped growling hours ago. Now it just hurt, a dull, constant ache that made it hard to think about anything else. Daniel shoved his hands deeper into his jacket pockets and kept walking down the main street, trying to ignore the smell of pizza coming from a restaurant on his left. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since everything fell apart. 2 weeks since his boss called everyone into the warehouse and told them the company was closing. Just like that. No warning. No time to prepare. Just a handshake, a sorry about this, and suddenly Daniel was unemployed. He'd tried to stay positive at first. He had some money saved up. Not much, but enough for a few weeks if he was careful. The problem was, life doesn't care about your plans. 3 days after losing his job, his mom called. She needed her medication refilled and her insurance had denied the claim. Again, the medicine cost $800. Daniel didn't even think twice. He paid for it. That left him with almost nothing. He'd applied to every job he could find. Construction companies, warehouses, grocery stores, fast food places, even the gas station down the street. But everywhere he went, it was the same story. We'll call you if something opens up. Nobody ever called. Now here he was, 28 years old, walking through downtown with exactly $3.47 in his pocket. He'd counted it 3 times that morning, hoping somehow the numbers would change. They didn't. Daniel had never been in this position before. He'd always worked. Always paid his bills. Always made it work somehow. But hunger has a way of making you see the world differently. Every restaurant he passed felt like a personal insult. Every person walking by with a coffee or a sandwich looked like they were living in a different universe. His pride kept telling him to wait, to figure something else out, to not be that guy who needed help. But his stomach was done listening to his pride. That's when he saw the community center. It was a small brick building wedged between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. Daniel had walked past it 100 times and never really noticed it. But today there was a sign out front, handwritten on a big piece of cardboard. Community dinner tonight. Everyone welcome, free. He stopped walking, free. That word seemed almost too good to be true. Daniel stood there on the sidewalk, people walking around him, and had an argument with himself. Part of him wanted to just keep walking, to pretend he didn't see it, to hold on to whatever dignity he had left. But another part of him, the practical part, the part that remembered he hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, told him to get over himself. He took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The door was propped open with a brick, and he could hear voices and laughter coming from inside. For a second, he almost turned around. What if someone recognized him? What if people asked questions? What if they looked at him with pity? But then the smell hit him. Real home-cooked food. Chicken, maybe. Or beef stew. Something warm and filling and exactly what his body was screaming for. His feet made the decision before his brain could stop them. Inside, the community center was bigger than it looked from the outside. There were rows of folding tables set up, most of them already filled with people. Families with kids, elderly couples, a few people sitting alone. The walls were decorated with colorful drawings, probably made by children. There was a small stage in the corner with a microphone stand and some chairs. An older woman with gray hair and kind eyes approached him almost immediately. She was wearing an apron that said Kitchen Queen and holding a clipboard. "Welcome, welcome," she said with a genuine smile that caught Daniel off guard. Mrs. Rodriguez, first time here?" Daniel nodded, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt. "Yeah, I saw the sign outside." "Perfect timing," she said, checking something on her clipboard. "Dinner starts in about 20 minutes. Here, take this." She handed him a small numbered ticket. "Just find a seat anywhere you like. We're family style here, so don't be shy about sitting with others." "Thank you," Daniel managed to say. The words felt heavier than they should have. Mrs. Rodriguez gave him a warm pat on the arm. Then her expression brightened like she just remembered something. "Oh, and we're having a little talent show between courses. Just for fun. Nothing fancy. Some folks like to share a song or a poem or whatever they're good at. We're actually looking for one more person if you're interested." Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, I'm good. Thank you, though." "No pressure at all," she said with an understanding smile. "The offer stands if you change your mind." He found a spot at a table in the back corner, not too close to the door where everyone would see him come and go, but not so far back that it looked like he was hiding. The perfect middle ground of invisible. The table was empty at first, but slowly other people filled in around him. An older man with a cane sat down across from him and nodded a greeting. A young couple with a baby took the seats to his left. Nobody asked him why he was there. Nobody stared or whispered. Everyone just existed in the same space, waiting for the same thing. Food. From his seat, Daniel could see the small stage. A girl who looked about 12 was standing there now, holding a piece of paper and looking nervous. Someone adjusted the microphone down to her height. Then the room got a little quieter as people realized the show was starting. The girl cleared her throat and started reading a poem. Daniel couldn't focus on the words at first. His mind kept drifting to the kitchen door, wondering when the food would come out. But then something the girl said caught his attention. She was talking about her grandmother, about how she taught her to be strong even when things were hard. The room erupted in applause when she finished. The girl's face lit up with pride as she hurried back to her table where an older woman, probably that same grandmother, pulled her into a hug. Next, an old man shuffled up to the stage with a harmonica. He played a simple tune, something that sounded like it belonged around a campfire under the stars. It wasn't perfect. He missed a few notes, but nobody seemed to care. They clapped like he'd just performed at a concert hall. Then a teenager did a card trick that fell apart halfway through, but he laughed at himself and the audience laughed with him, not at him. The whole thing had this warm, welcoming energy that Daniel hadn't expected. He found himself relaxing slightly. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Just eat, slip out quietly, and figure out tomorrow when tomorrow came. That's when everything changed. The woman who was supposed to perform last got a phone call and had to leave suddenly. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up in front of everyone, looking a bit worried. "Folks, we need one more person for our talent portion," she announced, scanning the room. "Anyone? It doesn't have to be anything special. Just share something that makes you, you." The room went silent. Daniel could feel people looking around, checking to see if anyone would volunteer. He kept his eyes down, studying the pattern on the table like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Then Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes landed on him. Right on him. Like a spotlight he couldn't escape. "How about you, young man?" she said, her voice carrying across the room. "You look like someone with a story to tell." Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. Every muscle in his body tensed. This was not what he came here for. He just wanted food. Just wanted to be invisible. Just wanted to make it through one more day. But somehow, with everyone now looking at him, with Mrs. Rodriguez smiling at him with such hopeful kindness, with his tired brain barely functioning from hunger and stress, Daniel heard himself say the words that would change everything. "Yeah, I can do something." He had absolutely no idea what the walk to the stage felt like. It took forever and happened in an instant at the same time. Daniel's legs were moving on autopilot while his brain was screaming at him to turn around and run out the door. But he couldn't, not now, not with 75 pairs of eyes watching him make his way to the front of the room. What had he just done? Why did he say yes? He didn't have a talent. He couldn't sing. He definitely couldn't dance. He didn't have any magic tricks or poems memorized. He was just a construction worker who'd been good with his hands, not his words. This was going to be a disaster. His hands were shaking as he reached the stage. The microphone stand looked about 10 feet tall, even though he knew it wasn't. Mrs. Rodriguez gave him an encouraging nod from the side. Completely unaware that she'd just sent him to his doom, Daniel stood there, gripping the microphone with both hands like it was the only thing keeping him from falling over. The room was quiet, waiting, expecting something, anything. His mouth felt dry. His mind was completely blank. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Someone coughed in the audience. A baby made a cooing sound. The silence was getting uncomfortable, and Daniel knew he had to say something. Anything. So, he finally managed to croak out, "I'm Daniel." A few people nodded encouragingly. One person clapped once, then stopped when nobody joined in. He paused, his mind still completely empty. "I don't really have a talent prepared or anything." Great start, he thought. Really inspiring stuff. Then something strange happened. Maybe it was the hunger making him lightheaded. Maybe it was the fact that he'd hit rock bottom and had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was just exhaustion from carrying around so much weight for so long. But the words just started coming out. "I came here tonight because I was hungry," Daniel said. and his voice was steadier now, more honest. Like, really hungry. The kind of hungry where you walk past a garbage can outside a restaurant and actually wonder if the food on top might still be okay. A few people shifted in their seats. Daniel could feel the mood in the room change, getting heavier, but he kept going. 2 weeks ago I had a job, had money in the bank, had my life pretty much together, you know. Then one day my boss calls us all into a meeting and says the company's done. Just like that. 15 years of construction experience, and suddenly I'm standing in line at the unemployment office with 100 other guys who all look just as confused as me. He wasn't even sure why he was telling them this. This wasn't a talent. This was just his life, his mess. But something about saying it out loud to strangers felt different than thinking about it alone in his apartment. The money I had saved up, Daniel continued, and he could hear his voice getting a little rough around the edges. My mom needed her medication, $800 that her insurance decided she didn't really need, I guess. So that was gone. Then rent was due. Then my phone bill. And suddenly, $3.47 starts looking like a fortune. The old man with the cane who'd been sitting at Daniel's table nodded slowly. A woman in the front row had her hand over her heart. Daniel took a breath and realized something. He wasn't panicking anymore. The shaking in his hands had stopped. He was just talking, just being honest, and people were actually listening. You know what the weirdest part is, he said, and without planning it, he started walking back and forth on the small stage. Pride. That stupid voice in your head that tells you to keep pretending everything's fine. I walked past this place 3 times before I finally came in. 3 times. Because some part of me thought it was better to stay hungry than to admit I needed help. A few people laughed softly. Not at him. With him. Like they understood exactly what he meant. Then Daniel's natural personality started coming through. The same guy who used to keep his construction crew entertained during lunch breaks with stories about his weekend, or impressions of their grumpy foreman. That version of himself that had been buried under stress and worry for 2 weeks. I stood outside for like 10 minutes having this whole conversation with myself, he said. And now he acted it out, pointing to one side of his head, then the other. Up here, my pride is going, keep walking, Daniel. You don't need charity. You're better than this. And down here, he pointed to his stomach. My stomach is going, are you insane? There's food in there, free food. Get in there before I eat my own liver. The room burst out laughing, real, genuine laughter. Daniel felt something shift inside him. This was working. Somehow, against all odds, this was actually working. He kept going, finding his rhythm. He talked about applying for jobs and getting rejected so many times he started taking it personally. He did an impression of the bored teenager at the fast food place who told him they weren't hiring, while simultaneously scrolling through her phone and chewing gum, like she was competing in the gum-chewing Olympics. More laughter. People were actually leaning forward now, engaged, wanting to hear what came next. Yesterday, I had a job interview at a warehouse, Daniel said, pacing the stage. The manager looks at my resume and goes, says here you're experienced in heavy machinery. I'm like, yeah, 15 years. He goes, and you want to work in a warehouse? Like I'm choosing this, like I woke up one day and thought, you know what would be fun? Starting over from scratch at 28? He shook his head, and his voice got quieter. But here's the thing nobody tells you about hard times. It's not just about the money, it's about feeling invisible. You walk down the street and people look right through you. Or worse, they see you and look away real quick, like being broke might be contagious. The room was completely silent again, but it was different now. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of silence where everyone's paying attention. Really paying attention. Daniel looked out at the faces staring back at him. He saw understanding there. Recognition. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others were nodding like he was saying things they'd felt but couldn't put into words. I came here tonight wanting a plate of food, Daniel said, his voice getting stronger. And I still want that plate of food, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to pretend I've suddenly forgotten I'm hungry. People chuckled. But standing up here saying this stuff out loud? He paused, genuinely surprised by what he was about to say. This is the first time in 2 weeks I've felt like a person again, not a resume, not a statistic, not someone to avoid making eye contact with, just a person, with a story. That maybe matters. He stopped pacing and faced the audience directly. So I guess my talent is just being honest, being real, admitting that life kicked me in the teeth and I'm still trying to figure out how to get back up. And if that's not a talent, well, he shrugged. At least I killed 5 minutes before dinner. The room exploded. People weren't just clapping. They were on their feet. The old man with the cane was wiping his eyes. The young couple with the baby were both applauding while trying to keep their child from wiggling out of their arms. Mrs. Rodriguez had her hands clasped together like she'd just witnessed something beautiful. Daniel stood there, completely stunned. He'd walked up to that stage with nothing. No plan, no talent, no idea what he was doing. And somehow, just by being brutally, uncomfortably honest, he'd connected with a room full of strangers. As he walked off the stage, legs still a little shaky, Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed his arm. "That was incredible," she said, her eyes bright. "Truly incredible." Daniel just nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His heart was pounding, his hands were sweating, but underneath all that nervous energy he felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt seen. He felt heard. And for just a moment, the hunger didn't matter quite as much. But what Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known as he made his way back to his table while people patted him on the back and offered words of encouragement, was that someone in the back of the room had their phone out. Someone had recorded the whole thing. And by tomorrow morning, everything was going to change. Daniel slept better that night than he had in weeks. His stomach was full from the dinner at the community center, beef stew that tasted like heaven, and his mind felt lighter somehow, like telling his story to those strangers had lifted some weight he didn't even know he was carrying. He woke up around 9 in the morning, which was late for him. Construction work had trained him to be up at 5:30 every day for 15 years. But without a job to go to, his body had apparently decided to catch up on all the sleep he'd been missing. His phone was on the floor next to his mattress, plugged into the wall. He'd been sleeping on just a mattress for the past week because he'd sold his bed frame for $60. Every little bit helped. Daniel unplugged the phone and checked the time. That's when he noticed it. Notifications. Lots of them. Way more than normal. His phone screen was covered with little icons showing missed calls, text messages, voicemails, and app notifications he didn't even recognize. "What the hell?" he muttered, squinting at the bright screen. He opened his messages first. There were texts from his cousin Jake, his old foreman from the construction company, a few former co-workers, and at least a dozen numbers he didn't recognize. Jake's message said, "Bro, did you know you're going viral? Call me." His old foreman had written, "Daniel, saw your video. Real proud of you, kid. Let me know if you need anything." The messages from unknown numbers were all similar. People saying they saw his performance, that it moved them, that they wanted to help. One person was offering him a job. Another wanted to send him money. Daniel's hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from nerves. It was confusion mixed with something that might have been fear. He opened his social media apps, which he barely used anyway. His notifications were in the thousands. Thousands. He clicked on one and found himself staring at a video of him, on that stage, talking about being hungry and broke and invisible. The caption read, "Man gives the most raw and honest performance about struggling in America. This is what real courage looks like. Watch until the end." Daniel watched himself on the screen, watched himself pace back and forth, watched himself do that impression of the fast food worker, watched himself get emotional talking about feeling invisible. It was surreal, like watching a stranger who happened to look exactly like him. Then he looked at the numbers below the video. 247,000 views, 31,000 shares. Comments were pouring in faster than he could read them. "Oh my God," he whispered to his empty apartment. "Oh my God." He scrolled through the comments, his heart pounding harder with each one. This man is speaking truth that most people are too scared to say. I lost my job 3 months ago and felt every single word of this. Thank you for sharing. Why is this not on the news? This is what real America looks like. Someone get this man a job. Better yet, get him a Netflix special. Daniel dropped the phone like it had burned him. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. He was just a guy who showed up hungry at a community center. He wasn't special. He wasn't talented. He'd just been honest because he had nothing left to lose. His phone rang, making him jump. It was Jake. Daniel answered, his voice coming out hoarse. Hello? Dude, Jake practically shouted. Have you seen it? Everyone's sharing your video. My girlfriend showed it to me this morning and I was like, wait, that's my cousin Daniel. You're famous, man. Jake, slow down. What's happening? I don't understand. Someone recorded you at that community center thing and posted it online. It's everywhere, bro. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. People are going crazy for it. They're saying you're like the most real person they've ever seen. Daniel sat down on his mattress, feeling dizzy. But I was just talking. I was just being honest because I didn't know what else to do. Yeah, and that's exactly why people love it, Jake said. Nobody talks like that anymore. Everyone's always pretending everything's perfect. You didn't pretend. You just told the truth. After hanging up with Jake, Daniel's phone immediately rang again. And again. And again. His voicemail box filled up. More texts kept coming. Someone from a local news station wanted to interview him. A comedy club owner wanted to know if he'd ever considered stand-up. A motivational speaking company asked if he had representation. The weirdest message came from someone claiming to be a talent agent in Los Angeles. Daniel almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something made him read it. The woman said she'd been in the entertainment industry for 20 years and had never seen someone connect with an audience like he did. She wanted to talk about opportunities. Opportunities. The word felt strange. 2 days ago, Daniel had been counting coins to see if he could afford a bag of rice. Now strangers on the internet were talking about opportunities. But the message that hit him hardest came from an email address he didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Thank you from a single mom in Ohio." He opened it. Dear Daniel, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I had to write. I watched your video while sitting in my car during my lunch break. I work 2 jobs and still barely make rent. My son needed new shoes last week and I had to choose between that and fixing my car. I chose the shoes. I've been beating myself up about that choice for days. But watching you talk about pride and hunger and feeling invisible, I realized I'm not alone. I'm not failing. I'm just trying to survive, like you. Like so many of us. You made me feel less alone. Thank you for being brave enough to be honest. Daniel read the email 3 times. Then he had to put his phone down because his eyes were getting blurry. This woman in Ohio, someone he'd never meet, had felt less alone because of him. Because he'd stood on that stage and admitted he was struggling. The phone rang again. This time it was a number with a local area code. Daniel answered cautiously. Hello? Hi, is this Daniel? The Daniel from the video? A man's voice, older, professional. Yeah, that's me. My name is Robert Chen. I own Chen Construction here in the city. I saw your video this morning and looked you up. Saw you used to work for Morrison's crew before they closed down. Morrison was a good outfit. I actually worked with their owner years back. Daniel's heart started beating faster. Yes, sir, I was with them for almost 15 years. 15 years is solid. Look, I'm not gonna waste your time. I need experience, guys, and from what I saw in that video, you're someone who shows up and does what needs doing. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow morning? 8 o'clock? Daniel almost dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Just show up and we'll talk. Mr. Chen paused. And Daniel? That thing you said about feeling invisible? I felt that way when I first came to this country 30 years ago. Took me a long time to realize that speaking up, being honest about the struggle, that's not weakness. That's strength. See you tomorrow. The call ended and Daniel just sat there staring at the wall. In the span of 12 hours, his entire world had shifted. He'd gone from invisible to seen by hundreds of thousands of people, from jobless to potentially employed, from alone to connected with strangers across the country who knew exactly what he was feeling. More notifications kept pouring in. Someone had started something called a GoFundMe, whatever that was. People were donating money for him, for his mom's medication, for his rent. Strangers were giving him money because his honesty had touched them. Daniel opened the GoFundMe page and stared at the number. It kept going up right there on his screen. $50, 100, 200, 500. People were leaving comments with their donations. For your mom's medication. Nobody should have to choose between health and rent. This is for all the times someone helped me when I was down. Pay it forward when you can. Your story is my story. Sending love and support. Daniel put his head in his hands and let himself cry. Real heavy tears that he'd been holding back for weeks. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were relief, gratitude, disbelief that the worst moment of his life had somehow turned into this. He'd walked into that community center wanting nothing more than a plate of food. He'd stood on that stage with no plan, no talent, no hope. He'd just been honest because he had nothing left to lose. And somehow that honesty had given him everything back. The interview with Mr. Chen went better than Daniel could have imagined. He showed up 15 minutes early, wearing the one decent shirt he owned that didn't have paint stains on it. Mr. Chen was a straightforward guy who didn't waste time with small talk. He asked about Daniel's experience, nodded at all the right answers, and then offered him a job on the spot. You start Monday, Mr. Chen said, shaking Daniel's hand firmly. 7:30. Don't be late. I won't be, sir. Thank you. Really, thank you. Walking out of that office, Daniel felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. He had a job with a real paycheck coming. The panic that had been sitting in his chest like a stone started to dissolve. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Daniel's phone never stopped buzzing. The video had been viewed over 2 million times now. 2 million. He couldn't even picture that many people in one place, let alone that many people watching him talk about being broke and hungry. The local news station did a follow-up story. They came to his apartment with cameras and everything. Daniel felt awkward the whole time, very aware of his secondhand furniture and the water stain on the ceiling he couldn't afford to fix. But the reporter, a woman named Patricia, was kind. She asked him real questions, not just about the video, but about what it meant to struggle in a city where everything cost too much. What do you want people to understand? Patricia asked, her cameraman filming every word. Daniel thought about it. I want people to know that most of us are closer to the edge than we think. One bad month, one emergency, one company going under. That's all it takes to go from okay to not okay. And when you're in it, when you're the one struggling, you feel invisible, like you failed somehow. But talking about it, being honest about it, that's when you realize you're not alone. The interview aired that evening. Daniel watched it at his mom's place, sitting on her worn-out couch while she held his hand. She'd been crying on and off since she found out about everything. Happy tears, she kept saying. Proud tears, your father would be so proud, she said softly. Daniel's dad had passed away 6 years ago, but his mom still talked about him in present tense sometimes. You spoke truth, mijo. That takes courage. The GoFundMe that someone had started without even asking him had reached $15,000. $15,000. Daniel stared at the number like it might disappear if he blinked. People from all over the country, all over the world even, had donated. $5 here, $20 there. Some people gave 100. One anonymous donor gave 1,000. With that money, Daniel paid his mom's medication bills for the next 6 months. He caught up on his own rent. He bought groceries. Real groceries, not just ramen and canned soup. He even got his car fixed. The check engine light that had been on for 3 months finally dark. But the weirdest part wasn't the money. It was the messages. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. People telling him their own stories. A teacher in Florida who'd been working 3 jobs. A veteran in Texas who couldn't afford his rent on disability. A college student in Michigan who was choosing between textbooks and food. Everyone had a story. Everyone was struggling in their own way. And they all said the same thing. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for making me feel less alone. Then the really strange opportunities started coming in. The comedy club owner called back, more serious this time. I know you're not a comedian, he said. But what you did at that community center, that was storytelling. Raw, honest storytelling. People pay to see that. Would you consider doing a show here? Just you on stage talking like you did in that video. Daniel almost said no. The idea terrified him. What he did at the community center was desperation, not performance. He didn't know if he could do it again on purpose. But something made him think about it. Maybe it was all those messages from people who felt less alone after hearing his story. Maybe it was the realization that his honesty had created something real. something that mattered. "Can I think about it?" Daniel asked. "Take your time," the club owner said. "But just so you know, I'd sell out the room easy." The talent agent from Los Angeles called too. Her name was Beverly, and she had this fast-talking energy that made Daniel's head spin. She threw around words like brand and platform and authentic voice. She talked about podcasts and speaking engagements and maybe even a book deal down the line. "You've got something special," Beverly said. "You connected with people in a way that's rare. That's valuable." "I just told the truth," Daniel said, still not quite understanding what all the fuss was about. "Exactly," Beverly replied. "That's exactly what makes it special. Nobody does that anymore. Everyone's trying to look perfect, sound perfect, be perfect. You showed up imperfect and honest, and people responded to that realness. That's lightning in a bottle." Daniel told her he'd think about it. He told everyone he'd think about it. Because the truth was, all of this felt overwhelming. A month ago, he was counting coins to buy rice. Now people were talking about book deals and speaking tours. It was too much, too fast. He went back to the community center on Thursday night. Mrs. Rodriguez's face lit up when she saw him walk through the door. "Daniel, I was hoping you'd come back." She pulled him into a hug that felt like something his mom would do. "Everyone's been talking about you. You're famous now." "I don't know about that," Daniel said, feeling his face get hot. "Oh, don't be modest. You did something beautiful. You showed people that it's okay to struggle, okay to ask for help, okay to be real. That matters." They set up for dinner like always. Daniel helped arrange the chairs and fold napkins. It felt good to do something normal, something that didn't involve cameras or interviews or notifications. During dinner, a younger guy around Daniel's age approached him nervously. "Hey, I don't mean to bother you, but I saw your video. I got laid off last month and I've been, struggling. But I was too embarrassed to come here. Then I saw you talking about pride and all that, and I thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. So thanks, I guess, for making it easier to ask for help." Daniel shook his hand. "We're all just trying to make it, man. Nothing to be embarrassed about." That conversation stuck with Daniel as he drove home that night. He'd been so focused on his own survival that he hadn't really thought about the bigger picture. But that guy at dinner, the single mom in Ohio, all those people sending messages, they weren't just responding to his story. They were seeing their own stories reflected back at them. He pulled out his phone and looked at all the missed calls. The comedy club, the agent, the podcast host who wanted an interview, the nonprofit that wanted him to speak at their fundraiser about poverty and dignity. For weeks, Daniel had felt invisible. Now everyone wanted to see him, hear him, know him. It was terrifying and exciting and confusing all at once. He thought about his dad, about what he'd say if he were here. Probably something simple like he always did. Something like, do what feels right and don't overthink it. Daniel opened his contacts and found the comedy club owner's number. His thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment. This was crazy, right? He wasn't a performer. He was just a construction worker who'd gotten lucky with one honest moment. But then he thought about that guy at dinner tonight. About the messages still coming in every day. About all those people feeling a little less alone because he'd been willing to stand up and say the truth. Maybe that was worth being scared for. He pressed call. "Hello?" The club owner answered on the second ring. Daniel took a deep breath. "Hey, it's Daniel. About that show you mentioned? I think I want to do it." "Seriously? That's fantastic. When are you thinking?" "Give me 3 weeks," Daniel said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. "I need time to figure out what I want to say, but yeah. Let's do it." He hung up and sat in his car for a minute, processing what he'd just agreed to. In 3 weeks, he'd be standing on a stage again, this time on purpose with people who'd paid money to hear him talk. The old Daniel would have thought that was impossible, but the old Daniel hadn't stood in front of 75 strangers and bared his soul. The old Daniel hadn't learned that sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the most powerful. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Another person thanking him for his honesty. Daniel smiled and started the car. He had 3 weeks to turn desperation into purpose. 3 weeks to figure out how to do intentionally what he'd done accidentally. 3 weeks to prove that one honest moment could become a whole lot more. The 3 weeks flew by faster than Daniel expected. He went to work every morning at Chen Construction, came home exhausted every night, and spent his evenings trying to figure out what he was going to say on that stage. It was harder than he thought it would be. At the community center, The words had just poured out of him because he had nothing to lose. But now, knowing people were paying to see him, knowing they had expectations, the pressure felt different. He filled notebooks with ideas, crossed most of them out, started over. His mom kept telling him to just be himself. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one who had to stand in front of a sold-out room and somehow recreate magic that had happened by accident. Because the show had sold out. Every single ticket. The comedy club owner called him a week before the show, sounding almost giddy. "We could have sold twice as many seats if we had the space," he said. "People are driving in from other cities to see you." That information did not help Daniel's nerves. The night before the show, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over his notes in his head for the 100th time. What if he froze? What if people were disappointed? What if the magic of that first night couldn't be recreated? Around 2 a.m, his phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Just wanted you to know I'll be there tomorrow night, front row. You've got this, Daniel. Just speak from your heart like you did here. That's all anyone wants." Daniel read the message 3 times, then finally managed to fall asleep. The day of the show passed in a blur. Work felt surreal, like he was moving through water. Mr. Chen noticed him spacing out and clapped him on the shoulder. "Big night tonight, yeah? Don't overthink it. You'll do fine." By 6 o'clock, Daniel was at the comedy club, standing backstage in a tiny room that smelled like old carpet and nervous sweat. He could hear people filling the seats on the other side of the curtain, voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. All those people were here for him. The thought made his stomach twist. The club owner poked his head in. "You ready?" "We're starting in 5. Yeah," Daniel lied. Ready, he wasn't ready. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. His carefully prepared notes suddenly seemed stupid and forced. Why did he think he could do this? Then he heard Mrs. Rodriguez's voice through the curtain, talking to someone nearby. That familiar warm sound that reminded him of the night this all started. The night he'd just been honest because he was too tired and hungry to be anything else. The club owner was introducing him now. Daniel heard his own name, heard the applause, heard the invitation to come out on stage. His legs moved on autopilot. The spotlight hit him like a wall of heat. He couldn't see most of the audience beyond the first few rows, but he could feel them. 150 people all looking at him, waiting for something. He saw Mrs. Rodriguez in the front row just like she'd promised. She gave him an encouraging nod. Next to her was his mom, who'd dressed up for the occasion. His cousin Jake was there too, giving him a thumbs up. Daniel gripped the microphone and opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The prepared speech he'd been practicing for 3 weeks completely vanished from his brain. Panic started creeping in. Then he thought about that community center, about standing on that stage with an empty stomach and an emptier plan, about how the truth had saved him that night. So he told the truth again. "I'm terrified right now," Daniel said, and his voice cracked a little. A few people in the audience laughed softly, not meanly. "I spent 3 weeks trying to write something smart and meaningful for tonight. Filled up 2 whole notebooks. And standing here right now, I can't remember a single word of it." More laughter. Understanding laughter. "The thing is," Daniel continued, feeling his shoulders relax slightly, "the first time I did this, I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just a broke, hungry guy who said yes when I should have said no, and then had to figure out what to say. Tonight, I'm a guy with a job and a full stomach, and everyone's expecting something, and somehow that's scarier." He started pacing just like he had at the community center. It felt natural, gave him something to do with his nervous energy. "So let me tell you what the last 3 weeks have been like. Because it's been weird, you guys. Really weird. I went from invisible to too visible. From nobody answering my job applications to my phone never stopping. From counting change for rice to people I've never met sending me money." Daniel talked about the interview with Patricia from the news station, how he'd stressed about her seeing his apartment. He did an impression of himself frantically trying to clean up before she arrived, shoving things into closets like some kind of disaster movie. The audience was laughing now. Real laughs, not polite ones. He talked about going back to work, how his new co-workers had all seen the video and kept asking him questions. This one guy, Tony, he comes up to me on day 3 and goes, "So are you like famous now?" And I'm standing there holding a shovel covered in dirt and I'm like, "Yeah, Tony, super famous. That's why I'm digging a trench in 90-degree heat." More laughter. Daniel could feel the rhythm now, the same rhythm he'd found that first night. The balance between humor and honesty, between pain and hope. But here's what nobody tells you about struggling, Daniel said, his tone shifting to something more serious. It changes how you see everything. Before all this happened, I used to walk past homeless people and think, that's sad, and then just keep walking. Now I can't do that, because I know how close I was, how close any of us are. The room got quieter listening. There's this guy who comes to the community center where this all started. His name is Frank. Frank's been living in his car for 2 months. He worked in accounting for 20 years, then got sick, couldn't work, lost everything. And Frank said something to me last week that I can't stop thinking about. He said, the hardest part isn't being broke. It's being treated like you're broken. Daniel paused, letting that sink in. We do that, don't we? We see someone struggling, and we assume there's something wrong with them. Like they made bad choices or didn't work hard enough. We don't think about the single mom whose car broke down and she lost her job because she couldn't get to work. We don't think about the guy whose company went under overnight. We don't think about the medical bills, the bad luck, the system that's designed to kick you when you're down. The audience was completely silent now. Daniel could see people nodding. I got lucky, Daniel continued. I stood on a stage and told the truth at exactly the right moment, and someone recorded it and it went viral. But Frank? Frank's just as honest, just as hardworking, just as deserving. The only difference is nobody happened to have their phone out when he needed help. Daniel looked out at the audience, at all those faces watching him. So yeah, I'm grateful for everything that's happened. The job, the opportunities, all of it. But I also know I'm not special. I'm just a guy who got hungry enough to ask for help and lucky enough that people listened. There are thousands of Franks out there, thousands of people one paycheck away from disaster, and they deserve the same chance I got. He took a breath. That's why I'm donating half of what I make tonight to the community center. To Mrs. Rodriguez and her incredible team who feed people without asking questions or making them feel small. Because that's where the story started. That's where I stopped being invisible. The applause started before he finished his sentence. Mrs. Rodriguez had tears streaming down her face. His mom was crying too, pressing her hand to her heart. People were standing up and Daniel just stood there, overwhelmed. Thank you, he said quietly into the microphone. Thank you for listening, for caring, for seeing people like Frank, like me, like all of us who are just trying to make it. After the show, people lined up to talk to him. They shared their own stories, their own struggles. A woman told him about her brother who'd been living in his car. A man talked about losing his small business during the pandemic. A college student said she worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford textbooks. Daniel listened to every single one, really listened, because he knew what it felt like to have a story that nobody wanted to hear. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged him before she left. You did good, mijo. Your father would be so proud. 3 months later, Daniel was still working construction, still showing up at 7:30 every morning, still coming home tired. But now he also performed at the comedy club once a month. He spoke at schools and community centers. He'd even been invited to talk at a conference about poverty and dignity. The viral video had been viewed over 5 million times. People still sent him messages every day. Some opportunities he said yes to, others he politely declined. Beverly the agent was still calling, still talking about bigger platforms. Daniel was taking it slow, figuring out what felt right. Every Thursday night, without fail, he volunteered at the community center. Sometimes he performed. Sometimes he just served food and talked to people. Frank had gotten into transitional housing and was working part-time. Daniel helped him prepare for job interviews. The truth was, Daniel had walked into that community center wanting nothing more than a plate of food. He'd left with something he didn't even know he needed. Purpose. Connection. The understanding that his story mattered and so did everyone else's. He wasn't invisible anymore. But more importantly, he'd learned to see the people who were. And sometimes that made all the difference.